Good Friday morning to you. I've been in the book of Exodus this week as we've been talking a little bit about rhythms and our process of faith. On Tuesday, I spoke a little bit to creating space for us to be in conversation with God, for us to listen and to respond and to just shut out the noise of the world. Sometimes that's a hard thing for us to do, and sometimes we don't realize how much we need to do that. On Wednesday, I spoke a little bit about our need for rhythm in our faith life. Exodus 23 talks about the rhythm of tilling the ground, that you work the ground for 6 years and you let it rest for 7. It's reminiscent of our response to Sabbath, that we work and we rest, even though I think we get it wrong. I think we're created to rest and then we work in response. Today, I want to talk about covenants. It's amazing to me that we have a God who loves us so much, that would do all that he has done. He created us, he formed us, he redeems us, and he makes us holy through his Holy Spirit. He restricts nothing from us that is good. It's a pretty amazing thing if you think about it. He restricts nothing from us that is good. And yet, God gives us the law. Now, sometimes I think we interpret the law as God being this demanding God who seeks nothing but obedience from us. And to a point, that's true. God gives us the law so that we would be obedient. But even more, God gives us the law, especially to the Israelites as they begin their travels through the wilderness, so that they might know how to live in community with one another. If you've gone through Exodus 20, 21, 22, 23, there's so many laws and there's some details that I think, why would God put this in the Bible? And then I look around at the world today. As sophisticated as we are, as educated as we are, as developed as we are, look at what we still do to one another. Look at the atrocities we commit to mankind, to civilizations. Look at what we are capable of. And so then I turn back to the law and I remind myself that God gives this to us so that we might know how to live with one another. Because on our own, we fail miserably. And so then we come to chapter 24, and that is where the covenant is given. God's been making covenants with his people for a very long time. The greatest covenant that we recall in the Old Testament is that of Abraham. When Abram is just a faithful man, God takes him under the stars. God says, one day your offspring will be as numerous as the sand. That's the great covenant that God would be our God and we would be his people. It's the Abrahamic covenant. Once again, there's a covenant made. And a covenant is just a godly promise. It's a promise God makes with us. Now, we talk about promises all the time. If you have kids, you have an interesting, I'm imagining, a negotiation with promises. I promise to clean my room. I promise to ground you if you don't, right? And then we have all these negotiations, unless your house is somehow different than my house. Even as adults, even as married people, even as in friendships, right? Or even worse, our work environments. I promise to get that email to you. And how often do we fail to actually respond the way we meant to? But a covenant is different. God promises he will be our God. And we promise to be his people, and the reality is we fail all the time, but God never holds our failure against us. And God never says, you know what? You've broke your covenant with me once, twice, 300 million times. I'm done. Find a different God. See, that's the unique thing about a covenant is even though we fail, God responds with grace and mercy and love. And so in chapter 24, this is, as we know the rest of the story, right? This is a great reminder of God's faithfulness in us. God has spoken to Moses. God has called the elders. He's told the people to sit still. He's given all of his words to Moses. In verse 3 of 24, it says this, Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all of the ordinances. And all of the people answered with one voice and said, all the words the Lord has spoken, we will do. What a joke, right? When have we as God's people ever done anything in unison? And I think of that and I read that because I know everything that comes after that, right? And I look at my own life and I think about our life as a community and I think, Do we ever respond with one voice? We duped God. Except for we didn't, did we? All the people resounded with a one voice because it was God's Spirit filling them. They wanted to be obedient. They wanted to follow. They wanted to live into all that God had done and would do and will do. And so they responded, and yet they failed. And that's us. We respond to God's forgiveness all the time, and yet we fail. We respond to God's forgiveness, we respond to God's mercy, and we want to do better, and yet it doesn't take us long before we lose our focus. We fail to hear. We fail to respond. And yet, God's faithfulness in us is unwavering. God is still our God no matter how many times we fail. And chapter 24 is the beginning of a really long series of failures on the part of the Israelites. They will wander what should have taken 3 to 5 days or even a couple weeks, took them 40 years. They will fail over and over again, and God will remain their God. As we end this week, as you end your workday, as you think about the weekend, how many times have you realized your failures? But more importantly, how many times have you seen God's love and mercy and grace in the midst of them? We have the opportunity to come together and worship this Sunday, and we begin in that place. We begin in that place of incredible faithfulness. Our faithfulness and trust in God that He will forgive us, and God's faithfulness and trust in us that He is our God, and we are His people. What a great reminder. What a great symbol of who we are as God's people. All the words the Lord has spoken, we will do. That's our best foot forward, knowing that we're going to fail in it. And yet God responds. God responds with so much more than we could ever imagine. I hope you have a great Friday. Can't wait to see you on Sunday.